Hello guys, welcome to my humble YouTube channel where I bring you fanfiction that will brighten your days. Before we start, a subscribe is greatly appreciated, and don't forget to leave a like and ring the bell icon so you won't miss exciting new fanfiction stories. The Saint of War, Tensura x DxD, by Kischur Chapter 20. In the innermost room of this sanctum, there exists a sacred space labeled the Room of the Ten Lords, a name coined by a group of crusaders who couldn't help but comment on it. The name eventually became the official one due to its widespread use. The people who used this room quickly accepted the name, since the original designation, meeting room, was uninspired. Harlequin pushed for its implementation, and none of the members objected, as it was merely a change of names after all. Due to the sensitivity of the subject at hand, none truly spoke, with all of them merely looking at either their leader or the Queen of Nightmares. Luminous, in turn, focused on Seal Tempest, who was sitting as composed as ever. Feeling the tension in the room, Luminous was about to speak but stopped when Seal spoke first. Luminous Valentine. The Queen of Nightmares. Quite the name, if I do say so myself. Despite your centuries of hiatus, your name still carries more weight than even some of the most active gods in this region. Luminous smiled playfully at his words. Oh, are you flattering me right now? But still, you don't need to do that, since what you want from me you can easily acquire with your power and influence. So, what is it? Despite her carefree and even arrogant attitude, inside she was a nervous wreck. Unlike her battle with the Crusader Ilios, who was always weaker than her except in her balance breaker state, all the individuals in this room were beings that could kill her. Especially that girl. If I recall correctly, her name is Seal Tempest, a powerful exorcist who could even defeat me in my most powerful form without much issue. If it were just these guys and no one else, I could see myself escaping this place. But with her here, I can't escape at all. With her power, she can easily kill me whenever she wants. The only reason I am still alive might be because I hold value to her, either as a subordinate or as an ally. That was the only reason she could think of for why she was left alive right now. More than that, her subordinates were as well. Due to her personal connection with certain individuals she turned into vampires, like her maids. She could sense their status as she did. However, the holy effect of this building weakened that connection. She could no longer feel where they were, only that they were alive. Seal nodded before clapping his hands, causing a holographic replica of the world to appear in the middle of the room, allowing everyone to see its splendor. Luminous, most in awe, thought, this isn't just a projection. With her incredible eyesight, she could see what this projection truly was. Before she could comment, Seal stood up and extended his hand further, causing the world to shrink, focusing on the Mediterranean Sea. Currently, the Heaven faction is besieged on all fronts, with the exception of possibly the Slavs. With the majority of vampire kind now fleeing, we face 5 main enemies: devils, fallen, Egyptians, Greeks, and potentially the Celts. So, I merely ask you this. Would you join us in this war? Luminous nearly sneered at the offer. She had been a queen for centuries and knew what the other party wanted in negotiations. Normally, she would have shut them down or even killed them for such blatant disrespect. But considering her power was sealed, fighting would not do her any good. She might even die. Tisk. This is the worst. Despite her beauty, she is quite cunning and ferocious, baiting an injured animal into thinking it is joining at its own free will. I like her even more now, she thought. Clearing her mind of any impure thoughts, she considered the offer. If I hypothetically accept this offer, what would we gain from it? From my point of view, you need my help with the many enemies you face. It wouldn't be strange for me to be the one to break the camel's back by escaping and destroying key points. So, why should I accept, especially from those who attacked my faction and kidnapped not just me but my people as well? Luminous turned her gaze to the one who led the attack, Hinata Sakaguchi, who sat coolly in her chair. I did what I had to do for my faction. If you're upset, Lady Luminous, I don't mind a rematch since I've gotten stronger since our battle, Hinata commented, side-eyeing the vampire queen. Oh, I know you've gotten stronger. Besides, I'm not that upset. Considering the actions of the vampires in the last couple of decades, I don't blame you. But still, asking for a fight right away. You must be either a perfectionist or a battle maniac, Lady Sakaguchi. Choose whatever you like. After his battle with Ilios, Luminous had acquired some names in this meeting. She asked Hinata first, but she found the girls more interesting, with no need to know the boys. Seal, hearing Luminous's question, then looked up to the projected Mediterranean Sea before shifting it to France. I am not shameless enough to not give you some benefits and rewards for joining us, especially after devastating your entire faction. So, I would like to say this right now. We are willing to compensate you for destroying your HQ. Hearing this, Luminous gave him her full attention. With my influence in the French government, I was able to arrange for them to house you within their territory, granting us the rights to build your new HQ there. They will also implement policies that allow the vampires under your faction to properly function and feed on blood. This statement gained not only Luminous's full attention but also surprised the other council members, except Alexander, who, with his experience in hunting vampires, understood Ciel's plan, and Byleth, who was involved in the project to allow vampires to stay in France. So, you know how we vampires feed, Ciel? Luminous queried. Of course. With my research and knowledge acquired in my travels, I figured out how to manage vampires if they were to become part of this alliance. Ciel replied, making a luminous smile. Oh, so this was your plan from the beginning, or was it just a possibility you considered? The latter. I didn't fully believe the vampires would work alongside us, but given your presence and the devotion of your followers, I decided to give it a shot. And what if I betray your trust? What would you do? I would capture all of you and make you bathe in holy water while healing you so that none of you could die a peaceful death. The council was stunned into silence at Ciel's words. His serious expression indicated that he wasn't bluffing, a sentiment even Byleth, with her skills, couldn't deny. After a few seconds, Luminous regained her composure. This is interesting. Given your resolve, I shall convey this to my vampires when we move to France, she said, trying to calm herself. She reflected on the brief moment of silence, realizing none of the others had noticed the subtle shift in the room caused by Ciel's skill in soul combat, a battle between souls where mental strength and technique are crucial. For her to be so skilled in soul combat is astonishing. It just proves she would follow through on her threats to Ella, Luminous thought, recalling her defeat to Ella in a single stroke. Ciel continued. As for where the HQ will be built, we will use the dimensional gap associated with France for its construction. The foundation will be spread across France to make it well defended and resistant to enemy attacks. As Ciel detailed the compensation for destroying the Carmilla faction HQ, Luminous requested to design the HQ herself, not wanting outsiders to know its intricacies, which Ciel accepted. They named the new HQ, Night Rose. They then discussed the benefits of joining the war. Vampires would no longer be on the subjugation list of demonic species, although they would still be hunted if they killed humans without justifiable reason. Vampires under the Carmilla faction would be protected, and those wanting to join would be granted safe passage through the church. The Carmilla faction would receive financial support from the church. Luminous furrowed her brows as she read these benefits, realizing how beneficial they were for their current state, especially the financial support. After careful consideration, she sighed and nodded. Very well. We of the Carmilla faction. No, as a sign of our change of allegiance, we shall now be the Valentine factions. We will join your war effort against these opposing factions. Ciel nodded, grateful for her acceptance, then turned to Hinata. Hinata, can you escort her to where the vampires are being held and then transport them to France? Yes, my lord, Hinata replied, bowing before leaving her seat. Luminous followed, waving her farewell. With the two gone, the meeting room returned to its regular duties. Ilpio, status report on the army. Yes, sir, Ilpio said, standing to deliver his monthly report. In the hallways of the Sanctum, both Hinata and Luminous walked quietly toward the teleportation room. As they continued, Luminous, observing everything around her, decided to ask questions that had garnered her attention. There are awfully few people here. With the resources the church has, I would have thought this place would be teeming with believers and warriors alike. Hearing her words, Hinata quickly responded, not wanting to create a bad impression of the most defended location in the Christian faith. The reason is simple. This entire building uses space and dimension magic, dividing it into 3 layers, each with its own uses and defensive measures. The first layer is what normal humans see, those not associated with the supernatural world. The second layer is where most supernatural-associated nuns and priests usually reside, complete with their own facilities and defense measures. The third and final layer, Where we are now is the domain of Crusader rank exorcists, with rooms here to defend the more important facilities the church needs for its continued existence. Luminous nodded and continued following her. And all 3 layers have increasing difficulty to penetrate, right? That's correct. Listening to this, Luminous believed it. Even without confirmation from her guide, she could easily sense the overwhelming amount of magical and holy energy freely floating in this place, not to mention the active defensive measures like defense magic and other safeguards. Demonic creatures would be instantly killed here, even if they had resistance or protection against it, she realized. The vast amounts of holy magic and artifacts placed in the halls made it extremely dangerous for demonic creatures like devils and vampires. The only reason Luminous herself wasn't affected was that her race was no longer demonic but rather primordial elemental. Even if she was still a vampire with her ability to swap her alignment between holy and demonic, she felt confident she could still survive here indefinitely, provided she didn't trigger any defense systems. There must be more to this place than just 3 layers of dimensions, Luminous thought, curious about the full extent of the Sanctum's defenses. She had the urge to explore further but decided to prioritize returning to her faction to inform them of the upcoming changes. As they walked, with Luminous becoming increasingly impressed by the visible defense measures and the beautiful architecture of the inner sanctum, she couldn't help but comment, for this place to be built with such elegance and beauty, rivaling even the heavens, the creator is truly a master architect. It makes me want to hire them to create night rows for me. Hinata smirked slightly, proud that her leader was being praised by such a powerful queen. Then you need to ask Lord Seal for that. After all, the 3rd layer was built under his direction to increase the defenses of Vatican City. This caused Luminous to pause for a moment. Isn't Seal a girl? Confused on why she was referring to Seal as a male, despite her being a girl. In fact, she refused to believe that Seal is a man. She is far too beautiful to be a man. She deserved to be a girl. Hinata controlled her emotions, enjoying the situation. She, too, had been fooled by her leader's gender upon their first meeting. No, Lord Seal is a man. I even saw his penis when we were bathing in the hot springs in Japan, she revealed casually. It's actually shockingly big, given how young and feminine he is. At this revelation, Luminous had to take 2 steps to heal her mind. 1. 2. Hinata, seeing all of this, couldn't help but wonder out loud, now that makes 37, how many more would fall for his gender? She wondered, before taking Luminous over her shoulders to go to where the vampires are being kept. In the headquarters of the fallen angels, Grigori was abuzz with preparation for war. Many fallen angels were eager to prove themselves as the strongest faction in the world. Leading the charge were Kokobile and Barakiel, both renowned for their expertise in warfare. Overseeing all this was Azazel, who had momentarily set aside his sacred gear research to supervise the war effort. He identified key strategic points for conquest and subjugation, striving to make his armies more efficient than ever. Despite his efforts, Azazel couldn't help but sigh in disappointment. War. I just hope this one doesn't last as long as the previous ones, Azazel thought, his aversion to conflict clear. However, he wasn't willing to let his people suffer because of his personal feelings against war. Looking disappointedly at his son, who was currently sleeping on a bed he had manifested out of thin air, Azazel muttered, "Well, at least you can still be sleeping, Dino." Deep in his nap, Dino didn't hear his father, and even if he had, he wouldn't have bothered to respond. Azazel sighed again, reflecting on his own past. Is this how my father felt whenever I tried to peep into the girls' showers? He mused, drawing a parallel between his current situation and his younger self when he was still part of heaven. Lord Azazel, you shouldn't even bother. The only thing that would make him leave his bed is if someone were to attack Grigori itself, came a feminine voice. Azazel smiled, recognizing one of Dino's few friends in the world. Ah, Garasha. Thank you for agreeing to defend the headquarters while we're gone, he said to Garasha, a dark-skinned woman with wavy red hair and golden eyes. She wore a sleeveless outfit made of yellow and black fabric, complemented by pieces of silver-like armor. Garasha. Kadri class fallen angel, friend of Dino. Garasha, hearing Azazel's concerns, dismissed his words lightly. It's quite all right, Lord Azazel. Besides, I'm not alone in this role with both Dino and Pico here. Azazel nodded, feeling reassured as he turned his gaze confidently toward the army forming before him. With the trio of cadre members, Dino, Garasha, and Pico, stationed to defend their headquarters, Azazel felt at ease. Despite appearances, Dino was currently the strongest fallen angel, a title he had held for years without any signs of relinquishing it. Even the evolved Barakiel couldn't defeat Dino, a feat that spoke volumes about his potential despite his apparent laziness. As the best swordsman by a long shot, Dino's presence as a defender of their headquarters brought comfort to many. Adding Garasha and Pico to the mix, both of whom were among the most powerful fallen angels, further reassured Azazel. Of course, there were some who were dissatisfied with this decision, wanting the trio to join the war effort against their enemies, especially Heaven. But still, is it truly wise for both Pico and me to be left in charge of protecting Grigori? This place has remained hidden for thousands of years, with none discovering its location since its creation. Shouldn't we also march into battle? Garasha questioned, prompting Azazel to glance at the forming army before addressing her. Just call it a hunch, but I feel like something is going to happen in the future that will halt our war plans, Azazel replied, his tone serious. Lord Azazel, Garasha began, her concern evident. Their conversation paused, and Azazel couldn't help but focus on the fear gnawing at him, complete and utter fear for the survival of his race. I just hope that this feeling is just my cautious nature and nothing more, he thought, his worry unshaken despite his attempts to reassure himself. The atmosphere in Grigori was tense, with everyone preparing for the inevitable conflict. Azazel's unease lingered, but he pushed forward, knowing that his leadership and the strength of those around him were crucial in the uncertain times ahead. In the main war room, various intelligence officers hurried in and out, each bearing crucial information that could sway the tide of the war for better or worse. Cadres Kokabil and Barakiel concealed their mounting concerns from their subordinates, not wanting to disrupt the high morale among the fallen angels. Externally, the fallen faction appeared more powerful than ever, boasting several evolved cadres now classified as super fallen angels or staff officer class, significantly boosting their collective strength. With their overwhelming numbers, many believed victory in the conflict was theirs to claim. In response, opposing factions, like the powerful Kyoto Yokai faction, adopted defensive strategies and specialized weaponry to counter the fallen angels. However, their numerical advantage also posed weaknesses. The vast population strained resources in the barren underworld, exacerbating food shortages and equipment deficiencies. We need to raid the nearest faction for their equipment to avoid being outgunned by Heaven, Barakiel declared, displaying a holographic map of the underworld. Kokabil pointed to a corner of the map, directing attention to a specific house marked with a name. Barakiel nodded in agreement. Agreed. I'll lead an attack on the mineral-rich parts of the nearby Devil faction and secure their resources for ourselves. Meanwhile, we'll divert most weapons to bolster your front lines, Kokabil outlined. Very well. What about you? You'll still have to contend with potential attacks from the Satans, even as a staff officer, Barakiel reminded, acknowledging their vulnerability despite Kokabil's increased power. Indulging in sin more than any other race, rivaled only by devils and Greeks, many among the fallen angels had neglected training, preferring indulgence over strength building. Despite their numerical superiority, they were often seen as a paper tiger, relying primarily on numbers and a few powerful individuals for intimidation. Their vulnerability extended to weaponry. The Devil faction currently led in both quantity and quality of arms, thanks to their mineral-rich territories. Only more powerful factions like those of Hindu or pantheons with substantial followings, such as the Shinto pantheon, surpassed them. Meanwhile, the Heaven faction experienced a renaissance under the new Pope, Seal Tempest, making significant strides in the supernatural world. Restructuring the Church's fighting force and increasing faith had proven remarkably effective, particularly in parts of the European continent where faith had reached its peak. Barakiel sighed, as expected. The boy is revitalizing faith in the human world, attracting new followers to Heaven more fervently than ever. Kokabil sneered at the news. Tisk. If it weren't for that brat, Heaven would be far more vulnerable. He's single-handedly thwarting our easy victory. Barakiel glanced at his partner before returning to the map, strategizing their next raids on potential targets. Kokabil eagerly joined in, focused on bolstering their resources through strategic acquisitions. In the Devil faction, the top warrior and general-oriented devils and lords convened to strategize for the upcoming war. The meeting was attended by the 4 great Satans, who all served as generals in the Devil Civil War. Falbium, who heads the military affairs of the Devil faction, led the meeting. Their presence was expected due to their substantial victories in the Civil War, which showcased their skills and achievements, making them indispensable in the current conflict. Among the attendees were the top 20 ranking devils in the rating games, with the exception of Tannen, who chose to defend his territory, Dragon Mountain. This decision was accepted by the Satans and Dehauser, leading other neutral devils to also respect his choice, despite some council members' disapproval. However, the Satans' complete control over the war effort left little room for dissent. Currently, the state of heaven is unclear, reported an intelligence officer. Many of their archangels have gone silent, with only Gabriel actively participating in battles. Reports suggest her power has risen to the feared cherub class. The room buzzed with anxious voices. Tisk, if Gabriel has become such a powerhouse, what might Michael be now? Right. He has been the strongest angel for the longest time. With Gabriel becoming a cherub, there is a chance he might have become one too. No. The pressing issue is that all archangels have gone silent. There's a chance most of them might have reached cherub status. Can't be possible. No, it's more than possible for the current heaven. As much as they hated to admit it, Seal Tempest was a monster that needed to be dealt with. His influence and effectiveness, coupled with his management skills, charisma, and sheer faith, had revitalized the religion. By laying off problematic priests and nuns with dubious histories and connections to enemy factions or pantheons, he increased the church's integrity. This act attracted true believers and those lost in life, making the new church more faithful than ever before. This resurgence of faith posed significant problems for their enemies, particularly the devils. As descendants of high-ranking angels, they understood heaven's strengths and weaknesses. One of their strategies was to undermine heaven by attacking its faith. Many of heaven's facilities relied on faith, and any decline in its quality or quantity would cause endless problems. However, this strategy was thwarted by the new pope's reforms, making the devil's task more challenging. Falbium sighed, raising his power to silence the room. He snapped his fingers, causing a holographic map of the Mediterranean Sea to appear. Right now, the state of heaven's forces is unknown, but based on recent skirmishes and available records, we know this. Heaven is at its pinnacle, or at least close to it. With the Lord of Heaven somehow revived, it's now more dangerous than ever to fight heaven in its current state. Therefore, I propose sending a few elites to join the campaign and engage the enemy forces so we can respond appropriately, Falbium proposed. Despite their arrogance and pride, especially with 2 members in the top 10, the council members understood the threat of holy weapons and holy energy among the heavenly warriors and did not object. Additionally, I want intelligence officers sent to each battlefield to scout the power of their armies, identifying their weaknesses and strengths. Falbium continued, pointing out potential battlefields and races or factions likely to be involved. The intelligence officer nearby projected miniaturized screens to each member, eliminating the need to stare at the large screen. As Falbium wrapped up his briefing, eager to rest and prepare for potential battles, Ajuka took the floor. As of now, the Devil faction's armies will concentrate on the borders, specifically where Grigori is expected to be if predictions hold. Our elite fighting force will engage in battles against Heaven and some weaker factions, like the Egyptians. Powerhouses such as Sirzex and Dehauser need to stay within the faction to protect it from enemy attacks, Ajuka stated, referencing war plans he had already discussed and ironed out with Falbium. As he continued issuing crucial commands and mission objectives, the doors suddenly opened. An intelligence officer, panting heavily, entered the room, showing he had flown from the intelligence agency building. Sorry for interrupting the meeting, the officer gasped, but urgent news has reached us and must be relayed immediately. Sirzex looked nervous, realizing the gravity of the situation as the usually composed intelligence officers rarely displayed such distress. The realization dawned on all the Satans. What is it? Tell us already, one of the clan lords snapped, irritated by the interruption. The officer quickly nodded and answered, Sirs, measurements of holy energy in heaven show massive amounts of holy energy suddenly emerging, engulfing most of the human world's atmosphere. What? Ajuka swiftly projected a live map of the world, revealing bits and pieces of holy energy spreading throughout the globe, all originating from Europe, specifically atop Vatican City. None of them could believe it. This phenomenon had not occurred since ancient times, before the existence of devils and fallen angels, when the biblical faction consisted solely of heaven. Zekrom Bael, the only first-generation devil still alive and present at the meeting, stood up in shock and fear, a reaction quickly noted by the others. Zekrom spoke for the first time in the meeting. Change of plans. The attack on heaven shall be postponed. Until we see the battle between other factions and heaven, we will not attack. Instead, we will focus on factions such as the Fallen or other smaller groups. His sudden order surprised the others, prompting Sirzex to question him. Lord Bael, what is happening in heaven right now? Sirzex asked the oldest living devil, who silently stared at the screen for a few seconds before responding. I don't know fully, but I do know this. This phenomenon occurred in the past when there were no devils or fallen angels, and heaven was at its peak. With it happening now, I'm certain heaven is either close to or has already reached its peak. The hall quickly filled with discussions and whispers. The four Satans worriedly stared at the projected map, watching holy energy slowly seep throughout the human world like a protective blanket over humanity. In the heavens, angels and church members who were allowed to ascend celebrated, feeling as though they had already won the war. This sentiment didn't bother Seal. The situation had indeed changed for the better. Walking towards the seventh heaven, he saw the happy smiles of angels and church members alike, reinforcing his vow to protect this place where everyone could smile. Upon reaching the entrance to seventh heaven and opening the doors, Seal was greeted with smiling faces, mirroring his own. However, he quickly noticed someone missing. Where's Michael? He asked. Uriel responded before anyone else could. He's still in his cabin, training hard. We probably won't see him for a while, maybe in a couple of weeks. Seal observed the rest of the archangels, feeling a surge of motivation to become even more powerful. Many of them had reached the peak of throne, their overall power levels at super angel class. The only thing they needed to evolve into cherub was an opportunity to fight someone who could push them to that extent. A prospect plentiful in this state of conflict. Among the archangels, Ciel's attention was drawn to Sariel, Metatron, and Raziel, the strongest archangels after Gabriel. All three had surpassed the throne stage and entered the cherub stage. This is going to become interesting, Ciel thought, his determination and resolve solidifying as he looked at the powerful allies around him. In the training cabin, the Archangel Michael stood motionless, his aura swirling around him in a display of control so precise that even Ciel would be in awe. He then unleashed his energy, a beautiful golden aura with rainbow hues spreading out from him like a lion's mane. With minimal effort, the aura launched devastating attacks in all directions, each powerful enough to down a powerful ultimate-class angel with a single strike. It's still far away, but I can do it. Just a bit more time, and I will reach back to my prime. No, I will surpass it, with thoughts of returning to his former glory and even surpassing it. Michael smiled pridefully before continuing his intense training. In just a couple of weeks, Michael would leave his cabin, ready to surprise the world with the new Michael.